as you mentioned, there's a reason why we promote and we say we use human translation. State Farm, for example, comes out as farm of the state, which it's not.
It's time for Company Profiles with your host, Paul Chase.
I want to take a minute to thank our heroes. As a realtor, I understand the importance of finding the perfect property for our everyday heroes. That's why I'm committed to helping first responders, military personnel, healthcare professionals, and teachers save money on their real estate transactions. I believe in giving back to those who serve our community, and that's why I offer special discounts and services to these heroes. Whether you're looking to buy or sell a home or invest, I'm here to guide you through the process, ensuring you get the great. Whether you're looking to buy or sell or invest, I'm here to guide you through the process, ensuring you get the best deal possible. My goal is to make sure the real estate process is as seamless as possible for our heroes so they can focus on what truly matters, serving our community. If you're a first responder, military, healthcare professional, or teacher, let me help you save money on our next real estate transaction. Contact me today by reaching out to pa-heroes.com. This computer. There we go. Good afternoon. This is Company Profiles. I'm your host, Paul Chase, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Michelle Salinas with Your Language Connection. Hey, Michelle, thanks for stopping by.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Michelle, tell me about Your Language Connection. What is it? Who do you serve? What do you do?
We're a language agency, so we provide interpreting and translation, and many people don't know this, but interpreting is oral, translation is written, and we also provide classes, language classes, in person, virtual, customized, private, public, and we recently, in the last couple of years, added media solutions, video dubbing and subtitles. So we do everything with languages, and we offer over 50 languages. Our biggest client market is education, schools, as well as early intervention. And now in the last 4 to 5 years, manufacturing, because they see the value in having language services to target more employees or potential employees and help them grow in the career possibilities and, in the manufacturing industry, which is a large industry in our area. And they're consistently needing employees. So using language services helps them maintain employees and gain employees. So we're seeing more also with manufacturing and distribution centers reaching out to us about our language services. So we're a community agency, so we don't do the hospitals and the courts. But other than that, we help our community communicate with each other.
So I spent 15 years in manufacturing. How does a manufacturer use your services? I'm hoping that you're doing more than just the employee handbook.
Right. We do translate employee handbooks because, there's a lot in there that if you don't understand can cause problems for the company. For example, what happens when you're injured? If you don't really understand the process of what you should do when you're injured, it can cost time and money for the company. We also help with safety trainings, translation of the presentations, as well as providing an interpreter, because cutting down on safety, on injuries and accidents can definitely save time and money. And we do HR enrollment. Here's the thing, when someone's looking at an hourly wage, 17 an hour versus 20 an hour, they don't know all the benefits. So they might switch jobs for the 20 an hour with not realizing they're losing out on 401ks, health packages, paid time off that might not be available for that 20 an hour. So more and more manufacturing and distribution centers that employ a large amount of non-English speakers are recognizing the value of making sure these employees understand their benefits packages. So they recognize the value of their job is not just that dollar, that hourly wage. And also when they understand their benefits through the translation of their handbook, it helps. We've translated union contracts. We offer on-site ESL classes, have helped several manufacturing provide ESL on-site because, or the private or classes, because again, it allows those employees to learn how to work higher level machinery, become managers or leaders in their area. So it helps with career advancement as well. So that's how manufacturing has been using our services quite often. And new employee orientation. If they're bringing in a management person, not necessarily entry level, but the management, they want to make sure that person that's coming on board understands their role and the how the company works. And so they will also pay for an interpreter for a couple of days of orientation to make sure they understand everything involved.
Wow, that's a lot more than I ever envisioned. So, especially for somebody who was forced to take 4 years of language in high school and struggled through every year of it, and I couldn't wait till I got out. So,
Well, I understand because, you know, when you're learning a language, you want to actually engage in a conversation. And that's why we teach conversational language classes so that you can have a, you know, conversation and communicate with people. It's not about taking a test.
yeah. Now, when I was looking at your website and there was a paragraph in there about keeping the translation in context, in the flow of things. So in English, I know context is everything, just because I mean, one English word could have multiple meanings depending on how it's used. So could you talk a little bit about the translation of anything and keeping it in context as opposed to just running a document through Google Translate and having to do a word for word translation?
As you mentioned, there's a reason why we promote and we say we use human translation. Because you can't just put it through AI. You know, State Farm, for example, comes out as farm of the state, which it's not, it's an agency. So if you literally translate everything, it's going to be misunderstood and mistranslated. So what we do is we make sure the message is translated. There are words that don't exist in other languages. Truancy, deductible, there's going to be a lot of words that don't exist in other languages. And if the translator doesn't know this because they're in another country and they don't know what the word is, and there's not an employee shortage and they don't want to lose their job, they're probably not going to ask. They'll look up on Google and do their best. So we want to make sure what we do for our clients is clarify their messages, make sure we understand what is the message. They're making sure that they want to make sure that receiver is understanding, so that the words, maybe it'll take 3 words instead of 1, but the idea is to get that message across. It's called localization and not necessarily translation. Now, some things have to just be translated: certificates, government certificates, marriage documents, birth certificates. But when you want that employee to make sure they understand what the benefits are, or a parent understanding, you know, what does truancy mean? What does that mean for them? It's not about just defining the word. It's about making sure they get the message. So we work a lot with our clients to make sure when we're translating that the message is coming across. There are also words that are offensive in other countries, in other languages, or they have a different meaning. You know, police and military definitely have different meanings in different countries because of how their experience is with those entities. Here, you know, police isn't automatically a bad thing for us, but in other countries, it could be. So, and then any words that go along with that industry. And so different medical, there's words, you know, that could be scary depending on the experience and the culture. So we take all of those into account as well to make sure that if the document is not supposed to be scary and offensive, we don't want to use any terminology that might convey that type of sentiment.
Now, what about, I think you mentioned like labor contracts and things like that. And I know the language in contracts is ultra precise for a reason.
Right.
Does legal translate well?
I mean, I
It
personally
does. Now,
does not
yeah,
translate well to English. So,
right. Legal is one, we stick to it. It's legal, like they're legal documents. But there's still words that, again, don't exist in another language. So they have to come up with something. So what we do is make sure that what that legal term is or that legal law is, to make sure it's translated that it is still saying the same thing, but you're not going to have the exact same word. But yes, with legal documents, we also have a system in place that, because we want to make sure the language is also universal. Some languages are spoken in many countries, like Spanish, Arabic, Swahili, and we have to make sure that someone who speaks Arabic in Iraq also understands a document, maybe if someone from Egypt translated it. So we have a system that we use for revising, editing, assuring that universal language is being used in those languages. A lot of people say, well, I learned Spanish in school, but I don't understand someone from Dominican Republic, or maybe the words are different. So we have to make sure that it's universal, so that no matter who speaks Swahili or Arabic or French or Spanish, they're going to understand the term. So a lot goes into play with human translation that AI cannot take into consideration.
I know, I mean, just here in the United States, dialect is everything. North Carolinians, it's funny because I used to work with in a company. The purchasing agent was from North Carolina. The trainer was from New York. She talked 90 miles an hour. He talked about 90 words per hour. And by the time he finished a sentence, I forgot where we started. If you weren't listening, you completely missed whatever it was she was saying. So I'm thinking of Argentinians and Puerto Ricans, and I'm a big foodie, so the cuisine may be similar, but what they call it is different. They call the same thing a different.
Yes.
So
Ecuador too. In Puerto Rico, the fried plantains or tostones. In Ecuador, they're patacones. Nothing similar. So you're right. It's very different. So we have to take all of that into account when a document is translated. When you're interpreting, you can, if someone is from Egypt, we try very hard to match with an Egyptian Arabic speaking interpreter if we can. If not, at least they know that that person's from Egypt. And they often, like Spanish, they have an understanding that in Argentina, there's certain words that are used that aren't used in Puerto Rico or Mexico. But with document translation, you don't have that flexibility. So when we translate the document, we have to make sure that it is going to be understood by a large audience of that language that speaks that language.
wow. That's a lot.
I know there's a lot to it that people don't realize. And, they want everything resolved by computers. It saves time, saves money. It is cheaper, but it's kind of like what you eat. You might get cheap food now, but you're going to pay later. Well, the same thing with document translation. You can get it cheaper, but you're going to pay later, because if it's mistranslated and misunderstood, it could cost you. It can end up costing you. And you don't know what it's going to cost you and when it's going to cost you, but eventually it will if it's not translated well.
So I want to shift gears just a little bit. Were you that kid in 6th and 7th, 8th, 9th grade that just their favorite class was Spanish and Latin and German all at the same time? How did you get started?
It's funny you said that, because I grew up on Long Island, and so we had a lot of migrant. My mom was actually a Vista worker for the migrant farm workers, so we spent a lot of time with migrants. So there was a lot of farming, and they started offering languages in middle school, 6 weeks of German, 6 weeks of Spanish, just to get you interested. And so my church, after 6 weeks of Spanish, felt I was fluent enough to go help them communicate with the Cubans that had come in the 70s to Long Island about how we could support them. And I was so excited. I mean, yes, I speak Spanish. Hola, ¿cómo estás? And when we got there, it was quite interesting, because the church was offering food and furniture and clothing. I looked up, I made sure I had all that vocabulary ready. And then I get there, and these men were all sitting in the living room, smoking their cigarettes. And when I told them what the church was here, so excited to tell them what the church was here to give them. And they're like, we have all that stuff. We need rum and cigarettes. And I'm like, oh, no, the church will not buy you rum and cigarettes. And then it dawned on me, wait, I don't have enough Spanish in my bank of 6 weeks of Spanish to explain to them why the church is not going to buy them rum and cigarettes. So, they're like, well, we'll take cash then. So, I didn't know how to help them other than to say, I'm sorry, they won't help you with those things. And, so that inspired me to want to learn more Spanish, so that if that ever came again, that I could explain to somebody why a church is not going to buy you rum and cigarettes. Of course, our support has come a long way since then. But, then I continued my Spanish in high school. I ended up in Spanish 5 in high school. I went to Spain between my junior and senior year. I wanted to be a bilingual teacher, and I came to Millersville, and I studied at the University of Madrid my junior year. And I just was always passionate about learning the language. And I did become certified as a Spanish teacher and an elementary teacher and an ESL teacher. But, I do love languages, at least those languages. And I love the ability to be able to communicate with others. But it did start in middle school with the little dabble in 6 weeks of languages, and the fact that I did get to apply it. Whereas a lot of students don't get to try and apply it or see how it could be of value in their life. So at that moment, I realized the value of being able to communicate another language with people. And so it became a passion of mine.
Now, on your website, you talk a lot, or you mentioned the role that your mother played. Could you share that story?
Well, as I said, because of what she did, she was a advocate for migrant farm workers, and we would go to Florida, where they picked oranges, and there were a lot of foreigners that were in that job. So, communicating with other people who didn't speak English, it started them, and just the idea of helping people who had language barriers, get what they're entitled to, better working conditions, living conditions. So, the passion was there for, serving and, that community. And then the cultural stuff and the travel. But when I thought about starting my business, which actually was at my dining room table, teaching Spanish or ESL to people who wanted to learn to speak with other people, and I started it, she helped me create my logo. Now, the logo has changed a little bit over time, but it still maintains the circle and the globe and the arrows connecting different countries. So she helped with that, and she was, she's no longer with us, but she was quite smart. She was a computer programmer back in the day when the computers were floor to ceiling. And so she did help me a lot in the beginning with getting things organized and business stuff. And I am grateful, and I have not lost, the logo, the whole frame of the logo. Every time it's revised or rebranded, that's the new thing, I make sure that the basics of what she designed for me is there.
That's great. And I'm thinking, you said that you studied a year in Spain, in Madrid. And I know just enough to really get myself into a lot of trouble here, but I was under the impression that Spain Spanish is different than South American or Central American Spanish. So how did that work? I mean,
Right.
culturally,
Well,
they're different. I mean,
right.
I look at the cuisine, because again, I'm a foodie, so I look at people's cultures through their food. You do it through language, probably.
Right.
Better, but not quite as tasty, but still better. Talk about that experience, just going from learning Spain Spanish and just getting into that, immersing yourself into that culture for a year, and then dealing with the migrants over here.
Right.
It
was very different.
Racist,
Right.
I don't mean to, but
No.
from the Central and South Americans, culturally, there's got to be a difference.
Oh, absolutely. Very different. Not just in the food, which I love. I'm a foodie too. And you could see in Spain, it's paella, no beans. They're not doing the beans. And so, and every different country does the beans different, even different color beans. So it's interesting. But in Spain, I spent time in Spain, graduated. I got a job in the school district of Lancaster. And one of my first jobs was as a bilingual teacher, and I started at King Elementary and then moved to Carter McRae, but a bilingual fifth and sixth grade. So I taught everything in Spanish while they were learning in English. What a learning year. Those were learning years for me, not only learning more vocabulary, because when you're teaching science, social studies, math in your second language as a college graduate, um, it was definitely challenging. And then the fact that accents were different, very strong, just like you said, even English, my brother lives in Tennessee, and sometimes I cannot understand people in Tennessee. I have to ask them to slow down and repeat themselves because of their accent for me, until I got adjusted to it. Well, the same thing when I was teaching, mostly it was Puerto Rican, Dominican, Cuban, Mexican. So that Latin America, Mexico kind of accent and words. Now, some of them I understood better than others. Those who came from the more suburban and urban areas, those who came from the rural, where there's less education and less access to books or vocabulary or better language skills, because they are out on the farms and the children are usually working. At the time, this was in the 80s, 90s, early 90s. So things have changed, but still, it was hard. And sometimes I'd get one student to interpret for another student, both speaking in Spanish, but I couldn't understand these students. But I was in the classroom all day long with 25 to 30 students who didn't speak English or very little English. So I'm grateful to my experience at the school district of Lancaster for my increased Spanish language skills. I also traveled, and I would spend months in Spain, or I would go to Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic, and I would spend time and just really immerse myself in areas that weren't the touristy areas to really build my skills. And it was hard to not get offended when people corrected me, because when you're in your 20s and you're just so confident, especially here in this country, I was like, bilingual, not too many people bilingual, but you go to other countries and it's humbling, and I just accepted it because it was a way I could learn to speak better. So now I'm very fluent and bilingual. I've been for a while, and so I have no trouble traveling to Spanish speaking countries by myself or with others and immersing myself. But it did take a while of being immersed in it and being willing to be corrected and learn.
Again, wow. Let's talk a little bit about the people who do the other languages, because again, looking at your website, you've got a large number of translators that are, pick up a lot of different languages from around the world. What experience, other than a college degree or being a native Egyptian speaker or Swahili, what are you looking for to make that shift? Just because, again, language is so nuanced.
Right. Well, here's the thing, and they actually don't have to have a college degree because we are community interpreting, and no interpreter has to have a college degree. They can be certified for courts or hospitals. They do have to have a high school degree. And they have to come to a virtual info session where I have them introduce themselves, talk about any experience they have, and I can evaluate their English skills, because as an ESL teacher, it's very easy for me to kind of figure out where they are and also understand if their pronunciation, their accent is strong. Many of them come to me with experience because they were interpreters in their country, whether for a school, whether for the government, whether for whoever they worked for, churches. And many of them, even while they're here for a while, they're helping their family members interpret at medical appointments and so on. So, and we have training that they have to attend to be able to work for me. And the training involves learning about our school system and our early intervention system, because our school systems are very different. There isn't early intervention in most other countries. I talk about manufacturing. Our training involves learning about what kind of industries there are, what vocabularies included in those industries, and what would if you're going to interpret for an IEP meeting, what might that look and sound like? So we involve training. They have to attend 5 to 6 hours of training, which is more about not necessarily the do's and don'ts. I mean, we do that as well, but it's about what's the vocabulary you're going to encounter? What kinds of meetings are you going to encounter, and how do you handle it if you don't know a term? So, and I'll be honest, we get a heads up as to what languages are going to be needed. School districts let us know, we're registering all these kids that speak Pashto and Dari. We're going to need them. So we start recruiting and hiring. And Lancaster is only one of 18 certified welcoming cities in the United States. And we are the largest refugee resettlement town in the US per capita, which means we get a lot of refugees and immigrants. So I remember when I was teaching ESL at Wharton, a large amount of Bosnian, we had a lot of refugees from Bosnia. So that was a need for that group of refugees and immigrants that came in. Recently, we've been getting from Afghanistan. So I have recruited and hired and trained quite a few Pashto, Dari, Urdu, Turkish interpreters for those needs. And I train them, but a lot of them do come with experience, but we are a community agency. So they're mostly interpreting for parents and therapists and employers that are really trying to communicate. It's not about whether or not you need heart surgery or whether or not you're going to jail. So, there are different demands in those markets. And so, it looks different, but we do have a training that our candidates have to go through to make sure they understand the clients we're serving and what their needs are, and to make sure they feel confident in asking questions for clarification, to make sure they're understanding the message and not making assumptions and doing what they need. And we have monthly virtual forums where linguists can join and ask questions, and we have topics. So there's ongoing training regularly just to keep them up to date. So we, as a teacher by trade, this is something that comes naturally for me because ongoing learning is important for all of us. And so we make sure that we provide it and they have access to, improving their skill set. Did I answer the question?
Yes. So how has your translation service been received here in Lancaster County?
Oh, well.
Because we have a lot of, not in my backyards, but we've always done it this way. There's
Right.
a lot. I mean, I joke around, but I keep telling people, we're up to date. We got the hula hoop last year. Color TV is coming. So how has the community received you?
Oh, it's great. I have a good reputation. I do a lot of volunteer work as well. I've been involved in the community a lot. So people, I always say the longer you live here, the smaller it gets. There's a joke it used to be a joke with my kids, and we would go downtown. They're like, oh, let's make a debate. How many blocks until somebody recognizes mom or mom knows somebody? And then it would be like 5 blocks, 3 blocks. And then it got to the point they don't even do it anymore. Let's see if when we step out of the car, somebody's walking by that knows mom. So I think my reputation in this area, I only serve really a section of Pennsylvania. We have some clients that are outside of Pennsylvania that like virtual. We do document translation for anyone because that's electronic. But, my reputation and the fact that they know that I care about what I do and the people we serve. And because we have a unique thing with Your Language Connection, my linguists schedule and make reminder calls. We offer courtesy reminder calls because if people don't show up, it's not in the best interest of anybody. So like we do medical offices and schools, and the teachers want to communicate with the parents. They can help the students better if they're able to. The therapists want to make sure the parents are understanding what is needed for their child. When we do medical offices, those eye doctors, how hard it is to get appointments anymore. They want to make sure those people are showing up. And also by helping with scheduling and reminder calls, whoever's receiving the services, thinks in their head, like, if you're going to a place and you can't speak the language and you're worried, you might not go. But if someone calls you and reassures you, I'm going to be your interpreter, it gives you more confidence to go to wherever you're in an event or an appointment or wherever. So it kind of helps that. So we're received very well. I hire a lot of people in our community. So they're serving their community. They understand how the community works. And a lot of my linguists are also involved in community service. And so they're able to learn what they learn, learn what we're teaching about early intervention, education, manufacturing, jobs, benefits packages, processes and policies. And they're able to share it beyond working for YLC. They're able to continue sharing it with their community. So I think our clients and others recognize the value of my agency, and that we're not just a 1-800 number. There are a lot of phone services where people are sitting by phones. They're in other countries that there isn't an employee shortage, and they're maybe making $6 an hour to sit by the phone and wait until someone calls and needs an interpreter. They're also not going to tell you if they don't know terminology because they're worried about risking their job and losing it. And they're waiting for that next call because that's how they get paid. We cannot compete with that. We don't have people sitting by the phone. But what we can compete with is that we are the human side. We are the people that live in the community, and we're interpreting for other people that live and work in the community. And that is the reputation that has been out there. And I think that is why, the company has grown larger than I ever guessed it would 10 years ago. So if you'd have asked me 10 years ago that how many staff people do you think you're going to have? How many linguists you're going to have? I would have been off, I'm sure.
So how do people find you? How do they get in touch with you?
Right. Well, it used to be about 80% referrals from our current clients, but recently, because I did hire an amazing marketing person, and he's done a great job at rebranding. We, in the past 4 years, I would say it's a 50-50. 50% referrals. Our clients love us. And so when you're in manufacturing and, when you go to those all the HR people go get together, they are saying, oh, we're having trouble, getting them to understand us. And then, like Novelty Brush Company, for example, was sharing about us at a chamber event. They spoke about, like, right, for everyone that we have used. And I was sitting there, and she was grateful to be able to share that they are able to use our services to communicate with their employees. So that's one way, through our clients that are just excited about our services and have no problems referring. And then also people find us on the website, because if they're frustrated with communication with an employee, a patient, a client, whoever, they're Googling, and we pop up because, we are it's not many of us, this language services in our area that do what we do and provide what we provide. Many of them only have maybe a few languages. It might be one person, they do their language, or they charge a 2-hour minimum, and we don't. And so, unless it's outside of Lancaster County, but we have a 1-hour minimum in Lancaster and virtual. So sometimes, it's just different ways, mostly the referral by our current clients or website, a Google search.
What is your website?
Yourlanguageconnection.com.
And is there a phone number people can call?
Yes, there is. It's not mine because it used to be mine, but now that I have someone else, I have had someone else taking the phone calls. It's 717-209-6906. So again, 717-209-6906.
I'm kind of glad that you did that, because people ask me my wife's number, and it's like, I have no idea. My phone knows it. I don't.
Right. You know what? We used to know lots of phone numbers. In fact, they say your brain can remember 10 digits. That's why phone numbers are 10 digits, because that's what your brain can remember. And now our memories aren't remembering even 4 digits because we don't have to anymore, right? So
yeah, all I have to remember is my 4-digit PIN.
Right, right. And if you lose your phone, who can you call, right?
Right.
So that's what we have to think. What if I lost my phone? Who would I call? Well, I do know a few numbers, so memorize. Thank goodness.
Yeah, my PIN and my gym locker combination.
It is different. Times are different, with the phone numbers and stuff, but it
So
is what it
Michelle
is.
Salinas with Your Language Connection, thank you so much for spending time with me and talking about your business. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate you asking me to join you today. It was a pleasure.